Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Sri and Peter.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. I'm PVSB, the Sweet Cuvée CPG guy. My area of his expertise revolve around brand loyalty, retail, and CRM. And my co-host, he's the extra dry CPG guy. And his SME, subject matter expertise, is direct-to-consumer, retail media, and marketplaces. Please join me in welcoming the notorious SRI. That's Sri. Sri, how you doing today?
The plan originally was when he called me the extra dry CPG guy, I saw how he worked this sweet cuvee and then I become the extra dry. But since he has glorified me as the notorious SRI, I'm going to give him credit. Doing awesome, Peter. I hope you are too.
I am. And, Sri, before we get to our guest, I want to remind our audience that all of our content, including our profitability series, our women's leadership series, our founder series, our retail series, it's all free. Just go to cpgguys.com. And if you want to keep current with everything we're doing, best way to do that is to follow us on LinkedIn. So here's what you do. You go to LinkedIn, you go to the search bar at the top of the page, you enter in CPG Guys. See that on, for you watching on video, I'm wearing the shirt CPG Guys. Enter that. When you get to our page, click follow. You're good as gold from that point forward. And Sri, there's one other thing I forgot to mention. We recently recorded our 100th episode and we forgot to celebrate with bubbly. So you know what I've done here, Sri? Look at this. I've got a bottle of bubbly, right? How about that? How about that? Let's open it up, shall we? Oh man, this is a hard one. Let's cheat and use a shirt. There we go.
Brian, you got to give him the secret trick on how you do this. There we go. You got to use the shirt.
How about
it's everyone's
and
secret.
while you pour, Peter, I will sing for you since you've already called me the notorious SI.
I gotta pass this through you, this glass to you through the internet, Sri. But you'll notice now, Sri, you know that I'm on the wagon, right? But have no fear. I got us a bottle of alcohol removed sparkling wine by Freixenet. And
thank you, Peter. I gotta sing for you, Biggie, Biggie, Biggie. Can't you see those cruel champagne of yours hypnotizes me?
Brilliant, Sri. That is just terrific. And the reason I wanted to celebrate, and particularly with this fine libation. Oh, yummy! Our guest today plays a role in two of our favorite things, Sri. That being e-commerce and adult beverages. I mean, that's pretty much our big two, right, Sri? So if you listen to the podcast, you've heard us talk about the meteoric rise of e-commerce in the beer, wines, and spirits business with the rise of Drizzly, Reserve Bar, and even Instacart, just to name a few. And while brands, particularly in the wine segment, have been engaging in D2C activities through wine clubs for years, for the other areas, the demand for delivery alcohol has grown exponentially since the beginning of the pandemic over a year ago. Here to help us decompose how a primarily sparkling wine importer is building an e-commerce strategy in this transformative time is the Senior Director of E-commerce at Freixenet-Mionetto USA, a leading sparkling wine importer in the country. He's an avid listener of the podcast. We love that about him, Sri, don't we? Absolutely. So please join Sri and me in welcoming Bryan Melo to the podcast. Bryan, how you doing today?
Peter, Sri, doing great. Thank you very much for having me. This is really great. Thank you so much.
Great, Bryan. I'm not gonna make you spell out the name of your company. We're gonna spare you that. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put a link to Freixenet-Mionetto's corporate site, their brand site, in the digital liner note to the podcast. But before we get started, would you please provide our audience with some history behind Freixenet-Mionetto's USA business?
So I guess I'll take it back to the beginning. We started it was really 1997 when our current CEO, Enrique Chiola, came to the U.S. and brought his passion for Prosecco here and really introduced Prosecco to the U.S. What started as a very much so a grassroots efforts, going door to door, pouring at consumer events and not taking no for an answer, eventually turned in. We a year later set up shop in Brooklyn with our first office, Mionetto USA. And then fast forward a few years after that, in 2009, Mionetto became part of the global sparkling leader, which is Henkel & Co. And then fast forward a few years later to 2011, we actually expanded the portfolio into our wine and estates portfolio, which we now refer to as artisanal as well. And then in 2019, Henkel and Freixenet merged to form really the #1 global sparkling player in the world. And at that point, the two U.S. arms, which was Freixenet and Mionetto, joined forces and became Freixenet-Mionetto USA. And here we are today.
Well, that was great, Bryan. Appreciate you giving us kind of a breakdown of the history. So why don't we get to the questions? We've got a lot of interesting ones for you. So let's get right to it. Bryan, I met you actually not recently. I met you a number of years ago at your prior position. It's not your first rodeo in either e-commerce or adult beverages. You previously served a similar role at Saint Michel Wine Estates. Can you give our audience a fundamental understanding of what your role is and the responsibilities you undertake vis-a-vis e-commerce for Freixenet-Mionetto USA?
Essentially drawing the blueprints and helping build our company's digital strategy. So that covers a few different aspects, but one of which is, e-commerce pure play retailers, like you think the Amazons, Wine.coms, and GoPuffs of the world. Second is marketplaces, things like Instacart and Drizzly and Minibar and those players. Working closely with our marketing teams, social media strategy teams, and then of course building new capabilities and technology. So I get to wear quite a few different hats, but it keeps every day interesting.
First of all, welcome to the show. I am an avid lover of all the brands that you already spoke to and represent. And Peter beat me to it today with the actual bubbly pour, but Peter was the non-alcoholic version. So I won't continue with the sentence. Well done, Peter. Your commitment today is awesome. So I want to start getting a little bit more deeper, Bryan, into the products that you have, the subcategories that you work in. And one of those is, given primarily that the primary focus is sparkling wine, needless to say, it's a very occasion-based usage, celebratory in nature more than anything else in consumer consumption. When your role as an e-commerce captain, how does this occasion-based need state work into e-commerce in your strategic activities that you're doing in e-commerce?
Sparkling wine is fairly unique. There's very few products in the world like sparkling wine. And the reason for that is, there's very few products in the world that are directly tied to a human feeling or a human sentiment, right? And so what's great about sparkling is we kind of sit at this cross section between two major occasions. And the first of which is actually everyday consumption. So years ago, people drank sparkling wine at weddings, but Prosecco and Cava, today they're largely under $20. They're very approachable, light and crisp and refreshing, very food friendly. And, it's becoming more of an everyday consumption type of a category. And that's certainly attributed to a lot of the growth we've seen in sparkling over the years. But the second occasion, which you touched on there, is celebration. And, the word celebration is used in particular because it's separate than a special occasion. So celebrations are irrespective of size. They can be large, but it can also be catching up with a family member on a Tuesday night or simply celebrating the end of a workday. And so how those two occasions kind of play into what we do with e-commerce and strategies is we've noticed a few things, both of which are great trip drivers. So for the standpoint of a retailer, they get the consumer online and to start shopping, or they get them in the store. So that's fantastic. And the second, one of the things I noticed early on with the company was that, particularly in e-commerce, rarely do the consumer buy just a single bottle. Normally it's either 2 bottles or 3 bottles at a time. And so it becomes a great basket ringer as well. And so in summary, we lean into both of these occasions and both of these benefits with our e-commerce strategy.
So Peter, the two big words I took away from that one, what do you think, Peter, is driving the basket ring is a big one because it really solves for the common e-commerce problem of weight volume ratios, which I was fearing walking into this conversation with you, Bryan, and you've answered it right up front. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
Bryan. So let's get into the current condition of this economy. You arrived at Freixenet 7 months after the start of the pandemic, and adult beverage consumption had shifted quite dramatically from on-premise to at home. So looking at the responsibilities you were charged with leading, what was at the top of your list to ensure that your brands would help consumers adapt to this new demand model and that your brands would still be relevant in it?
So for me, it was unquestionably understanding our portfolio's ecosystem and all of its complexities. So, we're very fortunate in the sense that we have a portfolio of global brands with great consumer pull. Because of that, we really try to put the consumer in charge and allow them to decide when and where they want to shop for our products. So I think one of the primary functions of a great brand e-commerce team is really identifying where consumers are first discovering a product online, whether it's Google, social media, a particular app that they use, et cetera. And then actually mapping out all the different touch points and paths that they take before they make a purchase. And I mean physically and visually mapping this out. And I think when any CPG or bev company goes through this exercise, they'll find a few things. Number one, it's very time consuming and it's a big project. And number two, it's incredibly complex. So you guys open up all the episodes of the podcast talking about how it's online, in store, and everything in between. And it couldn't be more true. So there literally can be hundreds of different paths or hundreds of different touch points that consumers take from discovering a product online to finally making a purchase. And I think where a great brand e-commerce team is identifying the channels where it's almost like the path of least resistance. If you think of water in a river or a stream, how it goes. Where do consumers most naturally gravitate between hearing about a product and making that purchase? And I call those conversion highways. So what we do is we focus on a conversion highway, we hone in on those occasions and try to craft our strategy around that.
So as you craft your strategy, as you just mentioned, Bryan, obviously this is a category. Alcohol tends to be one in the CPG space that's very heavily regulated. So when you build your strategy, obviously you're thinking about advertising and media and how you can communicate with the consumer, especially in a full funnel marketing ecosystem like e-commerce. So can you explain to our audience how this plays into your strategy build for media and consumer communication?
The general rule of thumb in our category is that we can't really show any preference to any particular retailer. And, some see this as a challenge. I personally see it as a huge benefit for us. I mean, looking at other CPG channels, a lot of CPG companies try to funnel consumers into a particular, conversion path or sub-channel to try to, make a purchase. Whereas for us, like I mentioned, we really put the consumer in charge and we try to, as I mentioned, identify what those conversion highways are. And we allow them to find our products. So our goal is to optimize as many digital shelves as possible. We combine that with some really great content, and we just trust that when the consumer finds us, they'll fall in love.
Brilliant, Bryan. So again, I'm going to steal Shree's favorite topic and dip my foot in the river called retail media. Yes, Shree, I did it again. I know, shaking his head. Anyhow.
Oh, hold on, Peter. Tonight's song for Peter.
What is it?
Think about this as you drive home.
Okay.
Oops, I did it again.
Yeah, thank you, Brittany. All right. So back to the retail media. It's obviously a growing channel. All brands are squarely focused on the impact that it has on the path to purchase on the digital shelf. So I want to get an understanding from you. How are you ensuring that your product awareness is happening on the digital shelf, and what kinds of capabilities you're focused on to invest against and what you're able to invest against given the nature of your business?
Yeah, this is great because this is a very fast evolving space for our category. Historically, really the only kind of channels we could work with are unlicensed marketplaces. So think of things like the Instacarts of the world. And so it's not really retail media, but it's probably as close as it gets. As I mentioned before, we really have two major use occasions for sparkling wine. It's everyday consumption and it's celebrations regardless of size. So for us, we really try to stay at the lower parts of the funnel. And, part of that exercise I talked about of mapping out the actual ecosystem of our products and touch points for consumers is we really do try to identify what those keywords are, parallel products are, and even parallel categories are that relate to our occasions and our portfolio. So once identifying those, we again hone in on those key terms and hone in on those conversion highways. And we trust that, again, the consumer will find our products from there.
So I want to jump a little bit into capabilities, digital resources. And then when I think of major alcohol manufacturers and I try to combine those, how do you approach developing those digital resources and capabilities relative to other manufacturers, aka maybe your competitors? Because all of you are competing in this digital shelf world, be they be marketplaces like Drizzly and Instacart, or omni-channel players like Total Wine, Albertsons, and many other retailers where you can actually go to market with your products.
Well, I can't really speak to any other beverage alcohol company, but part of our culture at Freixenet-Mionetto USA is rapid growth and really leading in sparkling wine. So we are still early in our journey and we're still developing, but our vision is to be early adopters to new technology, new capabilities as they become available, as well as leading the sparkling wine category in e-commerce. So when we do work with key partners and platforms and retailers, et cetera, we try to bring a unique perspective to the table. And what we do is we marry really two practices. The first of which is e-commerce, so things like the digital shelf and great content and conversion, et cetera. And the second is the nuances that come with a sparkling wine consumer, as I kind of touched on, and what they look for and what kind of comes with the shopping trip for them. So it's an interesting point of perspective, and I think a lot of retailers, platforms, and partners find that to be fairly unique from us.
That's very helpful, Bryan. So I want you to get your crystal ball because we're going to look into the future. I would love your qualified expertise to help us think about what are the next major areas of opportunity within the beverage, alcohol, and e-commerce space.
I see three major areas of opportunity. The first of which is live selling. So I think some retailers in beverage alcohol are already doing this, but I think it's a matter of time before a lot more forward-thinking retailers are jumping on a live session with a host or a speaker, talking about products and selling them, live. Obviously, we're compliant to do so. So that's the first. When we look at international markets, other categories, we've seen a large growth there. The second of which is online grocery. So there's a lot of discussion nowadays about as vaccination rates increase, how online grocery, may slow down a bit. But I'm of the opinion that as the busyness of life returns, and what I mean by that, your long days at the office, kids have to go to soccer practice and family gatherings and everything that we did kind of pre-pandemic, as all of that comes back, the practice of click and collect groceries that pretty much everybody learned during the pandemic will just become more and more convenient. And the more convenient it becomes, the more normal it becomes. And I think that really is a long-term area of growth. And the third opportunity I see of long-term growth is actually immediate delivery, like 1 hour or less in suburban markets. So logistically, if you think about it, cities are fairly easy to do. And that's historically where a lot of these, 1 hour or less delivery platforms have survived. But, with the pandemic, we saw large populations of people from the city moving out to the suburbs, maybe an hour or two away. And while logistically it's a little bit different to go shopping, it still is complex and it still is a hassle, right? You still got to drive and park and this and that. It's still time consuming. And so I think the consumers coming from the city will want that same demand. In addition to of course, the instant gratification that comes with online shopping. And so I think any retailer who can serve, that immediate delivery in suburban markets is set up for growth. And I think any CPG or brand that can, focus on these three areas is also poised for great growth.
Shri, I hear Bryan tell us that consumer expectations are changing rapidly. The likes of GoPuff being able to deliver to your home in 20 minutes. That's certainly, I think we saw the announcement from Amazon last week that they're doing half-hour delivery, 2 days. 1 day, that's not enough. It's got to be a half hour now. Amazing.
I think through that delivery cycle, Peter, of how half hour, 1 hour, 2 hour, Bryan talked about the 1 hour immediate need state, as well as the persistent growth of online groceries. I weigh that against, this is a category where on-premise, away from home consumption has always traditionally been a large part of, like, really big size and part of the category. And the last year and change, obviously all that changed, as at home was where everything was leaning, period, in food and beverages. But now with vaccinations being close to 50%, double doses in the country, and herd, aka getting closer and closer to those magical herd immunity numbers, mask mandates have gone away. Coming inside a restaurant or a bar and enjoying food and beverages is slowly returning to a sense of what it was a couple of years ago, which means all this means on-premise and away from home is rising once again. As an e-commerce leader, how do you think it'll impact your business?
Yeah, so I've actually had this question quite a bit in the past. I think with vaccination rates increasing, there will be a short-term hurdle in growing e-commerce as we kind of cycle against previous year performance. But I really do think that the category is still poised for long-term growth. So if you look at a lot of other categories, some of the biggest purchases of people's lives, buying a home or applying for a mortgage, buying a car, expensive vacation, et cetera, and of course, many, many other smaller categories, historically, over the long view, they've all moved more and more towards an online purchase. And I think that grocery and beverage alcohol are really going to follow the same trend. I can't really think of a whole lot of categories that have gone in the other direction. So I think over the long term, we're just at the tip of the iceberg. So I, for one, am very happy to be part of the process, to be living in the moment and going through all this.
To our audience, this episode and the 100+ episodes previously recorded, you can get them in audio and video format. You just need to go to cpgguys.com. And while you're there, maybe check out the list of other podcasts that we like and listen to, because I think it's good to get different perspectives from different people, different areas of focus. We encourage you to go check that out and listen to a couple of them. It's all available. It doesn't cost you nothing. Just go to cpgguys.com. And well, we want to get your feedback, because we want this podcast to reflect what you want to hear about and who you want us to talk to. So the best way to do that, go to ratethispodcast.com/CPG Guys. If you're watching me, I'm spelling it out on my t-shirt. Go to ratethispodcast.com/CPG Guys. Leave a review, and if you're inclined, give us a rating too. We like number 5, but hey, it's entirely up to you what score you give us. Bryan, this has been terrific. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us and learn more about your category and how you're structurally trying to think about building success and supporting this omni-channel world that's increasingly digitally driven. This has been very helpful. Thank you for joining us today.
Peter and Shri, thank you very much for having me. This has been great.
Yeah, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I'll mention again, we're going to put a link to Bryan's LinkedIn profile, to Freixenet-Mionetto's corporate site, and obviously Freixenet's consumer site in the digital liner notes of the podcast. Hey, Shri, what'd you think about this? Not bad, right?
Peter, every day I learn so much on the podcast. This category has always intrigued me, how you do e-commerce. So Bryan, I want to thank you for coming on board and demystifying many of the mysteries here on how this category works on e-commerce and delivery and things of that nature. But Peter, I feel to close out this episode, it would be very unfitting, since we decided singing is the way of life. So I'm gifting you Baby Bye 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 by the Backstreet Boys.
Nice, Shri. We are living in the 90s. This is terrific. By the way, Bryan, my compliments to the winemaker. This alcohol removed wine is actually quite delicious. I'm very pleased by it. So thank you.
We love to hear that. Thank you very much.
And thank you to our audience for joining us. Hope you liked today's episode. We look forward to you joining us on the next episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Goodbye.